This is the second part of the interview with Mr. Cunha. We pick up from where we left off last time, where we ended up with the Copa America triumph, and now we'll look into the 1990 World Cup qualifiers. Thank you for watching. There was not much of a break though, because the World Cup 1990 qualifiers were just on the horizon. In fact, by the end of that month. So immediately, Brazil had to shift focus to the World Cup at this point. But at least they were confident after the Copa America victory. Before the World Cup qualifiers, Brazil have a friendly against Japan just a week after the Copa America on July 23rd at Rio. So this was a match where Brazil would win 1-0. Bismarck scored in the 71st minute. So for this match, we have Tafarel in goal. He replaced by Zekaros in the 46th minute. Mazinho, he replaced by Josimar in the 46th minute. Aldair, Mauro Galvao, Andre Cruz, Dunga, he replaced by Alemão in the 46th minute. Valdo, he'd replaced by Silas in the 46th minute. Branco, he'd be replaced by Edivaldo of Sao Paulo in the 46th minute. This was Edivaldo's first recall since 1986, and it would also be his third and final cap for Brazil. Then you have Bebeto, who at this point had joined Vasco da Gama. And he'd be replaced by Renato Gaucho in the 46th minute. Captain of the team, and for the first time in the Brazilian team for the year, we have Careca of Napoli, who was rested for the Copa America. He'd be replaced by Tita in the 46th minute. And Tita himself would be replaced by Cristóvão in the 69th minute. This was Cristóvão's 8th and final cap, all of them in 1989. And Romario, and he'd be replaced by Bismarck in the 62nd minute. Now we come to the World Cup qualifiers. The first match is against Venezuela on July 30th at Caracas. Brazil would win comfortably 4-0. Branco would score in the 6th minute, Romario in the 69th minute, and Bebeto in the 80th and the 82nd minute. So for Brazilian lineup, we have Tafarel, Mazinho, Aldair, who had joined Benfica that season, Mauro Galvao, Ricardo, Dunga, Valdo, Branco. He'd be replaced by Josimar in the 78th minute. Bebeto, Careca. He'd be replaced by Silas in the 64th minute, and Romario. Next, we come to a crucial and one of the first controversial matches against Chile. This is at Santiago, and it takes place on August 13th. This match would end as a 1-1 tie. Ivo Basay scored for Chile in the 83rd minute, and Brazil had gone ahead in the 57th minute through an own goal. But it was mayhem on the field as early as the 2nd minute. Just to discuss the controversy before the lineups, the Chilean Ormeno was booked after 2 minutes after a foul on Branco. This somehow led to a scuffle between Romario and Alejandro Hisis. And Romario struck Hisis and was sent off as early as the 3rd minute. Also, Chile's equalizer was very controversial, as it was a very quickly taken indirect free kick at a point where Brazilian players were protesting. The referee was called into question for allowing such a decision. But before discussing this, going through the lineup, we have Tafarel, Mazinho, he replaced by Andre Cruz in the 76th minute. Aldair, Mauro Galvao, Ricardo, Dunga, Silas, Branco. He replaced by Jorginho in the 3rd minute because of sending off of Romario. And Jorginho had joined Bayer Leverkusen of West Germany that season. Bebeto, Romario, and Valdo. And we have to also mention that the original Brazilian squad also included Carlos Moser, but he had joined Olympic Marseille that season. And at the insistence of the controversial club president, Bernard Tapie, he was forced to return to France.
First, I have to mention something about the Venezuela's game. I forgot to mention that the Maldonado goal in the Copa America in Salvador was the first goal ever Venezuela scored in Brazil. So, and that is a fact that I remember that was highlighted by the press during that time. They said, "Hey, you see, this is the first time that our team is not doing well. This is the first time that Venezuela scored against us." And you can see that the game that Brazil won 4-0. So you see, by the score, you can tell that the team was more relaxed. So they were more confident about themselves, about their game. They played very well. It was an easy victory. I remember to watch all those matches, 1989, all the matches from Brazil. I remember to watch them, and that specific game, and there's another one that you will mention, the 6-0, and those were very easy matches, and we should highlight that or point out that Chile, the game against Chile, the match against Chile was very hard. One, because of something that I already mentioned. One, Brazil team was not as good as before, and Chile was a good team. The team of Chile was los Chilenos was they started to become a strong team in the continent a couple of years before, during the 80s, because the fact is, I don't want to sound arrogant, but the fact is, before the 80s, only the strongest team in South America was only Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. But after the 80s, a lot of teams started to become stronger, like Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, Bolivia. So that combination, at that moment, that Brazil had not a good team and Chile was improving very quickly. So that game was very hard. Brazil suffered a lot to tie that game, and it was a very close game. Even the game in Maracanã that we will speak about later was very hard for Brazil.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention the reason why Chile earned that indirect free kick was because Tafarel was adjudged to have taken too many steps. So it was something that is rarely called, but for some reason it was called in this match, and Chile got their goal. So the next match against Venezuela was a formality. This was at Sao Paulo. Brazil would win 6-0. Careca would score 4 goals. He scored in the 9th, 16th, 79th, 86th minute. Silas scored in the 37th minute. And another own goal in the 39th minute gave Brazil the 6 goals. So for this match, we have Tafarel, Jorginho, who from this point on, I would say, would supplant Mazinho at the right back. And Mauro Galvao, Ricardo Rocha of Sao Paulo. This was Ricardo Rocha's return to the Brazilian national team. At this point, he was playing for Sao Paulo. So you have Ricardo of Benfica, the captain. Dunga, he'd be replaced by Alemão in the 65th minute. Valdo, He replaced by Tita, who at this point had rejoined Vasco da Gama in the 68th minute. Branco, Bebeto, Silas, and Careca, captain of the team. So comfortable win. So now we come to an even more controversial match against Chile. On September 3rd, Brazil take on Chile for the decisive match to qualify for the World Cup. The match that has been known because of the firecracker incident. We have Tafarel, Jorginho, Aldair, Mauro Galvão, Ricardo, Dunga, Silas, Branco, Bebeto, Careca, and Valdo. And of course, these last couple of matches, Romario was suspended after the sending off in the first match against Chile. Brazil win this match with a goal in the 49th minute through Careca. However, in the 69th minute, there's a firecracker that's thrown from the stands and it lands, well, far from the Chilean goalkeeper, Roberto Rojas. But nevertheless, he feigns an injury. And we will see the image of his teammates carrying the supposedly bloodied Roberto Rojas off the field. And we later learned that this was not blood. This was actually
ketchup or something.
Yeah, something, yeah. This led to the walk-off of the team, and Brazil were declared winners of this match. They were awarded like the match 2-0. And obviously, after this, sentences were handed out against Chile. Roberto Rojas was banned for his trickery. In fact, Chile were banned altogether from the qualifiers of the next World Cup in 1994 as a result. And other bans were handed out to the manager, Orlando Aravena, and another Chilean player, Astengo, for leading the team to leave the pitch.
As I said, the Chile team was very strong. Remember that that team is the same team or the team or the base of the team that had won 4-0 against Brazil with Carlos Alberto Silva. I think it was in 1987.
Yes, the Copa America, yes.
Right? So the team, the Chile's team was very strong. It was not an easy game. I remember watching it. It was a tough game. Careca, when he scored, even his goal was hard to. If I'm not mistaken, he shot with the left leg, and the ball took a long time to reach the net because Rojas was an amazing goalkeeper. He played for São Paulo. If I'm not mistaken, it was right after, I think it was in 1991 or something like that. I can't remember very well, but Rojas played for São Paulo after that episode. He was an amazing goalkeeper, and the Chile team was very good. So it was a tough game. It was, we can tell that it was a tough game because Brazil at that time had already built the confidence to play the Copa America, after the Copa America to play the world qualifying games. So it was very tough, very hard. And that episode with the fire device, the firecracker, apparently, at least it was the press said, a girl that started the episode. She launched the firecracker, and she was on the Playboy magazine a couple months later.
Brazil qualified to the World Cup as was expected, but with some controversy. So, for the next few months, Brazil were in a preparation phase. Their first match on this preparation tour would be against the World Cup hosts Italy in Bologna on October 14th. It was a very high prestige friendly. And Italy, we have the likes of Roberto Baggio, Vialli, Baresi, Bergomi, Zenga, just all stars. So for this match, Brazil won 1-0 with Andre Cruz scoring a free kick in the 77th minute. Looking at the lineup, Brazil were missing Romario, Moser, Branco, and Valdo, who were not released by their clubs. They were also missing Bebeto and Ricardo. But you nevertheless have the starting lineup of Tafarel, Jorginho, Aldair. He'd be replaced by Andre Cruz in the 70th minute. Mauro Galvao, Ricardo Rocha, Mazinho, Dunga, Alemão. He'd be replaced by Giovanni, who was playing for Bologna at this point. He played in the last 2 minutes. Silas, he'd be replaced by Tita in the 68th minute. Making his first appearance of the season, Luis Müller of Torino, a veteran of the 1986 World Cup, and Careca up front, captaining the team. So interesting about this match is that the Italian press remarked how Brazilians played more like the Italians and vice versa. It shows how defensively Brazil had become at this point. And they had noted how Brazil played with 5 defenders, 4 flat, and 1 sweeper at the back, and all that. So this was now the tactic for the rest of the Lazaroni era.
Yeah. I remember watching that game as well. And again, it was a tough match. We can tell by the lineups of Italy's lineups. It was an amazing team, right? With a lot of stars. And we can tell that Lazzaroni's tactics and was working well at some point because they were facing one of the biggest teams in the world at that moment, and they played very well. It was a tough match. It was not like those kind of games that you watch and be impressed by the plays, and it was not a plastic game, I would say. I would put it this way, but it was tactically well disputed. It was tough, and we can deduct that Lazzaroni was doing well, although it was not like a joga bonito game, right? But he was doing fine. I was one of the critics of Lazzaroni. I didn't like his style, but we should admit that he did a good job. He didn't have many options, and also although the options that he had was good options like Giovanni, Valdo, and so on, but they were not ready. But we should consider that the Brazilian coach, anyone, they don't have enough time. The pressure is always on them, and they gotta achieve results very quick. So they have no time to develop the team little by little. So if we take a look at the Brazilian team, that this is a question that I know you're gonna ask about the Lazzaroni team and the 1994. So I can speak about this later. But we can tell that the team was doing fine. I mean, his job was doing well. He was doing a good job considering all the circumstances around the team and what he had available, and also the pressure that he was under, considering press and public.
The next preparatory friendly was on November 14th at Joao Pessoa against another strong team, Yugoslavia, a Yugoslavian side that included the likes of Robert Posinecci, Dejan Savicevic, Dragan Stojkovic, Zvonimir Boban, among others. So this ended as a scoreless tie. This would be Romario's return to the national team. For this match, we have Tafarel Josimar playing in his final match for Brazil, his 16th and final cap. Of course, remember him as one of the revelations of the 1986 World Cup, but he would have problems off the field that would lead to his discarding in the year 1990. So he would be replaced by Mueller in the 46th minute. Captaining Brazilian this time, Mauro Galvao, Ricardo Rocha, Andre Cruz, Dunga, Giovanni, Silas. He'd be replaced by Bismarck in the 75th minute. Mazinho, Bebeto, Romario, and he'd be replaced by Tita in the 67th minute.
Yeah. So remember when I said that the Brazilian team was with a generation that uh, was still in development. So if we look at the Yugoslavia team, it was an amazing team with amazing players. Stojkovic, he was on a. I think he could be one of the biggest players that we should mention like forever. I don't know why he was, of course, he is recognized as a big player, but his talent, he could be achieved more, in my opinion. He was an amazing player. So you see, Boban, who else? You said
Savicevic.
Savicevic. So the team was amazing. What I'm trying to say is that Lazaroni haven't had an easy life with the teams during that period. So we had a lot of good teams: England, Yugoslavia, France, and so on. So while Brazil was facing a lack of good players, we saw a lot of teams coming up, teams that in the past were not as good as they were at that moment, because you see the Chile had a good team, Yugoslavia amazing team. So a lot of national teams came up with good players with a good moment, while Brazil was facing a lack of amazing players. Let put this way. So that was a tough game. That game I don't remember. I can't remember if I saw it. I remember the players of Yugoslavia and Brazil, of course. But that match is specifically saying I can't remember if I watched it, but I probably did because I remembered all those players that you mentioned.
Now we come to the end of the year and the final match of the year for Brazil. On December 20th, they traveled to Rotterdam to face the Netherlands, the defending European champions. However, this was an understrength Dutch team that was missing the AC Milan stars, Gullit, Van Basten, Rijkaard, among many others like Gerald Vandenberg, just to name a few. The more recognizable players were the likes of Ronald Koeman and Jan Wouters. But it was a team that included four debutants. So, but Brazil was more or less near to full strength at this match. So Brazil won 1-0. Careca heading in the winner in the 55th minute. So Brazil, we have Tafarel, Jorginho, Aldair, making his first appearance of the season, Julio Cesar, who another 1986 veteran and revelation, who was at this point playing for Montpellier in France. He could come on in the 46th minute. We have Carlos Moser of Olympique Marseille, Ricardo Rocha, Branco, Dunga. He replaced by Silas in the 73rd minute. Alemão, Valdo, Romario. He replaced by Bebeto in the 58th minute. Careca, and he replaced by Mueller in the 73rd minute. That ended the calendar year and more than 20 matches for Brazil.
Yeah. So that game, I can remember watching it, but I think we can deduct that Netherlands or Holland, they had a good team as well. Although the big stars were not there, but the mentality, the tactics. So it's something that it's kind of inherited by the players that come after or the players that were replacing the big stars. So I wouldn't never expect a easy game against Netherlands, especially when they are the defending champions of Europe, right? So again, we can tell that Lazzaroni was doing a good job. It was a tough game. It's never easy to face teams like Holland, and they won. But with all the difficulties that Brazil had during that time with the lack of good players in the midfield.
So, how was his position with the press and public at this point?
Lazzaroni. So I believe I remember that some people were still criticizing him because of the style of the game. Although he was achieving success, he was achieving his goals. Brazil won hard, tough games against Italy. They won the Copa America, but the Joga Bonito was still missing. So the pressure was still on him because of the style of the game and some local press were still asking for some specific players. So, for example, João Paulo is a player that was highly mentioned during that point, and he had a few opportunities with Lazzaroni, midfielders like Neto from Corinthians at that moment. So I'm talking about the press of São Paulo, right? So Lazzaroni he faced a lot of problems in regards to that. The pressure was still on him, and the game, the style of his game wasn't helping him because although he was achieving success, it was like a in Brazil we say like a mechanic game. It's not like the natural Brazilian style.
In this first year, Lazzaroni gave debuts to a number of players and also established others who would make an impact on Brazilian football. Who were the standouts of his selections in this first year, in your opinion?
Uh, well, honestly, I believe that Lazzaroni was one gear on the machine, right? So he helped a lot with changing the mentality, the tactics of the team, and that was the tool that he had on hand by that moment because of the lack of players that we already mentioned before. So he selected a few players that became very important to the Brazilian title of 1994. Ricardo Rocha was one of them. Dunga was a player, although we should point out that most of those players, they already played for under 20s national teams or the Olympic team. So Lazzaroni haven't selected anyone that was kind of, hidden and nobody knew. Everybody knew those players. So his contribution, in my opinion, is that he selected some players and helped them to develop their confidence. But most of the players were there, so Brazilians knew the players. Bernardo is one player that I believe was first selected by Lazzaroni, if I'm not mistaken. But his appearance stopped with Lazzaroni as well, so he couldn't move forward with the national team for 1994. So I believe his contribution was good to build up the confidence, but all the players that he selected was previously selected by Carlos Alberto Silva or coaches from lower categories. So I cannot say that he was that important for the future generations. I mean, he didn't select hidden players that nobody knew. He didn't do that. He helped them to develop the future teams, but That's my point of view. That's what I see.
Now, this is still an era in Brazilian football where, let's say, until 1986, you have a handful of players playing in foreign leagues in Europe while they're still with the national team. Was the Lazzaroni era really the beginning where you have so many more transfers of players to Europe at a larger scale?
Yeah, you're right on that, Sean. But I think it's a coincidence because a lot of players selected by Lazzaroni were already playing in Europe, right? In Portugal and Italy mainly. And after Lazzaroni or during Lazzaroni era, we had more transfers to Europe. But I think it's a coincidence. It has nothing to do with the players that we had, right? Because again, the players, if you we can notice that one only Giovanni and Valdo and Silas, I'm not sure. Yes, Silas was playing for Sporting. So only three midfielders that had some spot in the like the spotlight in the football scenario were playing in Europe during those times. So you can see that we haven't had we Brazil haven't hasn't had many options to offer to Europe during that time. I'm talking about the midfielders, but a lot of defenders were playing in Europe. A lot of strikers were playing in Europe. So it was a kind of coincidence, in my opinion. It has nothing to do with Lazzaroni job itself.
In closing, do you think that Lazzaroni was in some way responsible for building a team with a spine that would win the World Cup in 1994 and maybe helping to change the mentality of Brazilian football?
Yes, he helped with the, like I said, to build up the confidence of those players. But if I have to name to point out responsibles for the 1994 team, I would say Falcão and Carlos Alberto Silva. They really picked some players that were kind of hidden or were not considered by the press and public to be on the national team. Falcão and Carlos Alberto Silva. Lazzaroni helped, of course, with everything I already said, and also with the mentality, with the tactics, because Parreira basically he didn't adopt the 3-5-2, but he adopted the mentality, the defensive tactic of Lazzaroni. So I think Parreira tried to put his style on and playing with the 4-4-2 and taking advantage of Lazzaroni's mentality, just adjusting it to his point of view. That's what I think Parreira did. So yes, Lazzaroni helped a lot, considering the fact that Brazil won the 1994 Cup based on his previous job. So because of the 1994 winning, Brazil had or the teams in Brazil, the lower categories in Brazil, they started to pay attention more on tactics than the skills or the joga bonito game. So it persisted until a certain point that until 1998 until 2002, when we had another generation very high skilled with Ronaldinho and Kaká, Rivaldo, and so on. So until we got different players, high skilled players, that mentality persisted. And even with the big generation, with the Ronaldinho and so on, the Brazilian coaches still persisted with the tactic mentality. So summarizing, that was an important turning point for the Brazilian tactics for sure.
With that, we'd like to thank you for your participation in this interview, and we will certainly continue with the year 1990 of Lazaroni at some point in future.
All right.
Yes. Yeah, a lot to discuss there too, although it does not end well.
It's gonna be a pleasure.
Yeah. So for any questions and comments, you may contact me on my blog and on Facebook under Soccer Nostalgia. On Twitter, I'm at SP1873. Mr. Polwill can be contacted on Twitter at 1888 letter, and his blog is the 1888 letter. You may also follow the podcast on Spotify and Google, Apple, and Stitcher podcasts, all under Soccer Nostalgia Talk Podcast. Please leave a review, rate, and subscribe if you like the podcast. And Mr. Cunha's contact information is also included: his Twitter page, Facebook page, and Instagram page. And again, all this information is listed on the blog and podcast listings. So thank you again, Stanley, and love to continue these discussions on Brazilian football history as much as we can.
Thank you guys. Thank you guys for the invitation. It's a pleasure to talk about soccer and hope you see you guys soon.
Thank you.